It wasn't on the official calendar. Karoline Leavitt's name didn't appear on the speaker list, and yet, somehow, her presence had already sent a chill through the room. The auditorium at Georgetown University had filled early that morning. Students, faculty, media crews, even a few diplomatic staffers in the back rows were waiting for the Unity in American Politics symposium, hosted by Vice President Kamala Harris. The irony didn't escape Karoline. She hadn't been invited. In fact, 3 days earlier, a student organization sympathetic to her message had attempted to list her as an alternate panelist. The request was quietly denied. But Karoline showed up anyway. Blazer sharp, signature cross necklace just visible above the collar, she sat in the back row. She didn't flinch when aides whispered to each other. She didn't react when the moderator's eyes widened in her direction. All she needed was timing and the truth. As Kamala Harris took the stage, the applause was immediate but thin. Cameras clicked. Aides flanked the sides. Harris began her address with rehearsed calm. "We gather today to prove that voices from every background can come together," she began. Karoline leaned forward slightly. Then came the moment. Harris paused, scanning the rows. Her eyes stopped on Karoline. The vice president's tone shifted. "But we also must be cautious of disinformation," she added. "Some of them may even be here today." A hush fell. Karoline didn't move. She didn't blink. The audience glanced toward the back. Someone stood up, an aide with a clipboard. He leaned into Harris's ear. Her eyes narrowed. She spoke 3 words into her mic. "Get security ready." The crowd shifted, murmurs rising. But Karoline didn't wait for security to arrive. She stood, straightened her blazer, and walked slowly toward the microphone stand at the center aisle. She hadn't been invited to speak, but she wasn't leaving until she did. The clicking of her heels echoed louder than anyone expected. Students in the front row turned their heads, unsure if they were witnessing a stunt or a historic moment. Faculty members whispered in frantic fragments. "Is she on the program? Did someone approve this? Is security even moving?" Karoline kept walking. Each step felt like a strike against the unspoken rules that governed the room. She hadn't been invited, but now she was taking the center aisle as though it belonged to her. From the stage, Kamala stiffened. Her smile evaporated. She leaned toward her chief aide, who whispered something urgent. The vice president's mic was still on, and the words, "Remove her, now," crackled through the speakers. 2 suited security officers began moving toward Karoline, but she didn't stop. She reached the front of the auditorium and turned, not to face Kamala, but to face the audience. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes scanned the room. "If I'm such a threat," Karoline said calmly, "then maybe you're afraid of what I have to say." The tension snapped. Gasps rippled through the hall. One officer hesitated, unsure. The other glanced toward the stage, waiting for a signal. But none came. Kamala was frozen, caught between protocol and optics. If she ordered Karoline's removal now, the headlines would write themselves. Karoline stepped onto the small platform between the front row and the stage. She didn't need the vice president's podium. She didn't need a spotlight. She only needed a minute. And in that minute, the entire room and the entire country would hear something no staffer could redact, no microphone could mute, and no political firewall could contain. But first, she had one question. Facing Kamala directly, Karoline asked, "Why is truth treated like trespassing?" For a second, no one breathed. The question hung in the air like smoke after a shot. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even rhetorical. It was a line delivered with calm clarity. And even the security officers hesitated. Kamala leaned into her mic. "Miss Leavitt, this is a closed event. You are not authorized to speak. But Karoline didn't flinch. You just called for unity. Is unity only for those who agree with you? A ripple ran through the room, half gasp, half awe. This wasn't a line you recover from with a press release. This wasn't a tweet. This was live, and Kamala knew it. This isn't your platform, the vice president replied sharply. You were not invited. Karoline nodded slowly. And yet here I am, which should tell you something. She stepped forward, closer to the small mic stand at the front aisle, her voice lifting just enough to carry across the auditorium. I didn't come here to be provocative. I came here because for too long one side of this country has been told to sit down, shut up, and smile through the censorship. I've done all three. I'm done now. Behind her, the security guards waited, still unsure of their next move. Kamala's team looked to her, but she didn't speak. Removing Karoline now would turn the moment into a political firestorm. Letting her continue risked even more. It was a no-win scenario. Unless Karoline imploded. But she didn't. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This, she said, unless you'd like to stop me in front of all these cameras. Kamala didn't answer. Karoline began again, her voice steady but firm. You say this event is about unity, but what you really mean is conformity. You want applause, not accountability. The room wasn't just quiet now, it was tense. Every pair of eyes was locked on Karoline or flickering nervously toward the stage. Kamala's hands were clenched tightly on the podium. Behind her, aides whispered into earpieces, but no one moved. The cameras were still rolling. The damage, if it was damage, was already happening. Karoline raised the letter again, then folded it into her blazer. They didn't just deny me a seat at the table. They denied the students who invited me. They denied open debate. They denied the idea that this country is strong enough to handle disagreement without fear. A few heads nodded in the crowd. They told me I didn't qualify to sit here because I'm divisive, because I might inflame. What they really meant is I think differently. I challenge their scripts. I don't take my lines from a party-approved teleprompter. That's what scares them. From the stage, Kamala leaned forward again. This isn't the place for a political ambush, she said flatly, her tone clipped. Karoline didn't miss a beat. It's only an ambush if someone wasn't prepared for the truth. The line hit. A sharp, involuntary gasp came from the media section. One of the journalists lowered her camera, stunned. Even the security detail shifted, unsure whether they were witnessing a disruption or history being made. Karoline stepped to the center of the aisle. I'll be brief, she said, raising her hand slightly. But since I'm apparently so dangerous, let me tell you what I would have said if I had been invited like everyone else. The room held its breath. I would have said this. America doesn't need curated conversations. It needs courageous ones. We've raised a generation afraid to speak, not because they have nothing to say, but because they know they'll be punished for saying it. Murmurs now, stronger than before. I was told to stay in the back. I walked to the front, not because I want attention, but because someone had to go first. She locked eyes with Kamala. And apparently, that someone had to be me. The silence in the room had changed. It was no longer the hush of confusion or disapproval. It had become focus, attention, the kind of silence that only follows a shift in power. Karoline didn't need the microphone anymore. Her voice had found its rhythm. Her confidence, once read by some as audacity, now sounded like authority. I wasn't born with a political dynasty behind me, she continued. I didn't inherit media networks, elite donor circles, or legacy platforms, but I was raised to speak plainly, fight fairly, and never flinch when the truth makes people uncomfortable. A low murmur of agreement echoed from somewhere in the left side of the auditorium. Karoline paused just enough to let it settle. I came here today because someone has to challenge the theater we've built around politics, where we pretend to debate, pretend to listen, and pretend that we're diverse so long as everyone agrees. Kamala shifted visibly behind the podium. Her smile had vanished. Her posture was now guarded. She was accustomed to being the most powerful voice in the room, but this moment wasn't scripted for her, and she knew it. Karoline looked directly into the camera of a journalist live streaming from the side aisle. "You know what makes people like me dangerous," she said. "It's not that we disrupt events, it's that we disrupt narratives. I was told to wait, to ask permission, to be silent until it was my time. But if I waited for permission from people who never planned to give it, I'd still be in the back row." A student in the front stood up. Another followed, then a third. Karoline turned slightly to address them. "You're told to listen, nod, and clap, but I'm telling you, if your voice makes the powerful uncomfortable, you don't owe them silence. You owe them honesty." A round of hesitant applause began to build, fragile, unsure, then louder. Kamala Harris lifted her mic again. "Miss Leavitt, this event must return to the program." Karoline stepped back toward the center, still holding her ground. "You're right, Madam Vice President," she said coolly. "Let's talk about the program, how it was designed to feature only one kind of voice." Another wave of applause, this time from the back of the room. Karoline didn't smile. She didn't need to. This wasn't about her. It was about the fear in that room, slowly turning into something braver, and she wasn't finished yet. From that moment on, it wasn't just a room full of students and staff anymore. It was a broadcast. The live streams were spreading like wildfire. Conservative outlets, independent journalists, even mainstream media began resharing clips. Within minutes, Karoline Leavitt's name was plastered across every platform. Conservative anchors praised her. Independent podcasters called her speech the most fearless moment in recent political memory. Even those who disagreed with her message were forced to admit she had done what most wouldn't dare. She had challenged power directly and didn't blink. By sunset, Karoline's impromptu speech had been watched over 10 million times. It was everywhere, clipped, reposted, hashtagged, and as the media frenzy grew, Karoline didn't hide. She didn't celebrate. She sat backstage alone after the event, scrolling through texts from people she'd never met who now felt seen because of her words. Her movement wasn't built in a press room. It wasn't strategized by consultants. It wasn't shaped by legacy headlines. It was built in moments like these, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. And what had started with a disinvitation had now turned into something unstoppable. Karoline Leavitt hadn't just disrupted an event. She had ignited something bigger than permission.